That night, the lights went out. My son walked in, holding my husband's hidden bank statement. My heart stopped when the power cut out and my son appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face and the paper clutched in his trembling hand. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible above the thunder. "You need to see this. Dad's been lying to all of us for years." In that moment, as rain lashed against the windows of the home I'd shared with Richard for 43 years, I had no idea my entire life was about to unravel, or that the digital empire I'd secretly built would be the only thing that could save me. 6 months ago, if you'd told me that I, Eleanor Simmons, a 67-year-old grandmother of 4, would become what they call an influencer with over 2 million followers, I would have laughed until my sides hurt. Back then, I was just Mom or Grandma Ellie, the woman who made everyone's favorite apple pie at Thanksgiving, and who couldn't figure out how to change her ringtone without calling her youngest son Michael. Richard, my husband, never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of my technological ineptitude. "Eleanor still thinks Snapchat is a brand of cookie," he'd joke at family gatherings, triggering waves of laughter while I smiled tightly, used to being the punchline. My children, James, Sarah, and Michael, weren't much better. They'd exchange knowing looks whenever I asked for help with my phone, treating me like I was somehow defective for not being born into the digital age. It wasn't always like this. Richard and I met in college, both of us studying business. I was sharp, ambitious, top of my class. But when we got married, he was the one who pursued his career while I raised our family. I don't regret that choice. I loved being there for every first step, every school play, every skinned knee. But somewhere along the way, they forgot that I had a mind capable of more than just remembering birthdays and perfecting recipes. Everything changed when my best friend Margot passed away last year after a brief battle with cancer. We'd been inseparable since 3rd grade, and her absence left a hole in my life that nothing seemed to fill. On the day of her funeral, her daughter handed me a small gift box. "Mom wanted you to have this," she said. Inside was a journal with a handwritten note. "Eleanor, now it's your turn to live." The journal was filled with bucket list items Margot had planned for us. Trips we'd talked about taking. Experiences we'd promised to share someday. On the last page was a simple instruction. "Start a YouTube channel. Show them who you really are." I laughed through my tears. It was so like Margot to push me out of my comfort zone, even from beyond. That night, while Richard was asleep, I pulled out my iPad and created an account. I had no plan, no content strategy, just a promise to my dearest friend that I would try. My first video was terrible. The lighting was poor, my hands shook, and I rambled nervously about Margot and our friendship. I posted it anyway, naming the channel Ellie's Second Act, and promptly forgot about it, assuming no one would ever see it. 3 days later, I checked back and nearly dropped my phone. 2,347 views. Comments flooded in, mostly from women my age sharing stories of loss and new beginnings. I felt a connection I hadn't experienced in years. That night, I made another video, this time about starting over in your 60s. By morning, it had 5,000 views. I was hooked, but I kept it secret. My family had made it clear what they thought of old people on the internet. Richard was particularly dismissive. Those senior citizens making fools of themselves online for attention. He'd scoff whenever a news segment featured an older viral sensation. Don't they have any dignity? So I filmed when the house was empty, edited while Richard golfed, and responded to comments when everyone thought I was just playing solitaire on my iPad. My channel grew steadily. 10,000 subscribers, then 50,000. I learned about lighting, editing software, content planning. I watched tutorials late into the night, absorbing digital marketing concepts that came naturally to me, despite what my family believed. My content evolved from personal stories to lifestyle advice for women over 60. I talked about reinvention, financial independence, and embracing technology. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, becoming somewhat of a tech expert while my family still treated me like I couldn't operate a microwave without supervision. The first brand deal email came as a shock. A skincare company specializing in mature skin wanted to pay me $3,000 to feature their products in a video. I nearly declined out of fear. How would I explain the package arriving, the money? But something in me, perhaps Margot's spirit, urged me to take the risk. I set up a separate bank account, used a friend's address for deliveries, and filmed at her house. That first sponsored content performed exceptionally well, 87,000 views in the first week, a 12% engagement rate. I'd learned that was impressive. And hundreds of comments from women saying they purchased the products based on my recommendation. The brand immediately offered a 6-month contract worth $25,000. By month 4 of my secret digital career, I was earning more monthly than Richard, who still patronizingly handed me spending money from what he called our accounts I'd never had full access to despite decades of marriage. My subscriber count hit 500,000, then quickly climbed to 1 million after a video about reclaiming your identity after being just someone's wife and mother for decades went viral. Hiding my success became increasingly difficult. I bought a high-end laptop and camera equipment, keeping them at my friend Nancy's house. I explained my frequent absences as senior center activities or book club meetings, excuses that my family barely acknowledged. So disinterested were they in my actual life. The real humiliation began at James's birthday dinner. My oldest son had always been the most like his father, successful, arrogant, and unfortunately, dismissive of me. The entire family gathered at an expensive restaurant, and conversation turned to James's recent promotion. "Mom, you wouldn't understand this," James began, not even looking at me while addressing the table. "But I've been put in charge of our company's digital strategy. We're focusing on influencer marketing. You know, people with large online followings who promote products." Sarah laughed. "Maybe Mom could be an influencer. She could show people how to make Jell-O molds and crochet doilies." I felt my face flush as everyone at the table, including my grandchildren, laughed at the absurdity of Grandma Ellie having any digital relevance. Richard patted my hand condescendingly. "Eleanor's more comfortable in the analog world, aren't you, dear? She still writes checks at the grocery store?" The truth burned in my throat. I wanted to tell them that just that morning I'd signed a contract with a major tech company to promote their new tablet designed for seniors, a deal worth $120,000. That I had a social media manager and a content calendar. That brands were competing to work with me because of my authentic voice and engaged audience. Instead, I smiled tightly and excused myself to the restroom, where I checked my phone to find an email informing me that I'd been nominated for a Webby Award in the Breakout Creator category. The contrast between my digital success and my family's perception of me had never felt more painful. Things escalated at Thanksgiving. I'd prepared the usual feast, but was distracted by a major livestream event I had scheduled for Black Friday, a collaboration with 5 other 60-plus creators that had major brands sponsoring at $50,000 each. Richard mistook my preoccupation for forgetfulness. "Eleanor's getting a bit scattered these days," he announced to the table, as if I weren't sitting right there. "Found her staring at the washing machine yesterday like she'd forgotten how to use it." The truth was, I'd been mentally rehearsing talking points for a podcast interview, but his comment sparked concerned looks from my children. "Mom, is everything okay?" Sarah asked, her voice dropping to the tone one uses with toddlers and the elderly. "You do seem a bit disconnected lately. Maybe we should talk about assisted living options," James suggested. Not to me, but to his siblings, as if I weren't capable of participating in a conversation about my own future. "Before things get worse." I almost choked on my water. "Things get worse? I'm perfectly fine." Richard sighed heavily. "Eleanor, you forgot to pay the electric bill last month. The notice was sitting right on the counter for weeks." This was news to me. "I never saw any notice." "Because you're not as sharp as you used to be," Richard said with patronizing patience. "It's nothing to be ashamed of. It happens to everyone." I hadn't seen any bill because Richard had always insisted on handling our finances. For 43 years, I'd trusted him completely, but something in his expression made me uneasy. "I want to see our accounts," I said suddenly. The table fell silent. Richard laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous. You've never been interested in the finances before." "I'm interested now." "Mom, Dad's been handling the money forever," Michael interjected. "He knows what he's doing." "And I don't?" My voice was sharper than I intended. Sarah reached for my hand. "Mom, we're just worried about you. You've been secretive lately, disappearing for hours. If you're having episodes, we need to know." I pulled my hand away. "I'm not having episodes. I'm having a life." Richard stood abruptly. "That's enough. Eleanor's just tired. Let's drop this nonsense about accounts." The subject was changed, but something had shifted in me. That night, I tried to access our joint accounts online, only to discover I didn't have the passwords. When I asked Richard, he brushed me off. "Why do you suddenly need to see that? I give you everything you need." Did he? I realized I had no idea what everything actually meant. How much did we have? Where was it kept? What would happen to me if something happened to him? For the first time in my marriage, I began to feel afraid, not of Richard, but of my own ignorance. I'd built a digital business generating hundreds of thousands of dollars while remaining completely in the dark about my own household finances. The irony was almost too much to bear. I tried several more times over the next few weeks to get information from Richard, but he became increasingly evasive, then irritated, and finally, angry. "You've never cared about money before," he shouted during our last confrontation. "Why are you suddenly checking up on me? Don't you trust me after all these years?" I did trust him, but his reaction was making me doubt that trust for the first time. I considered hiring a private investigator, but realized I had something better: a vast online community. Without revealing too many personal details, I made a video discussing financial transparency in long-term marriages. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments from women who'd discovered financial infidelity after decades of marriage. One comment in particular caught my eye. "Check the mail carefully. My husband had statements sent to his office for years, but sometimes they slip through to the home address. So I began intercepting the mail before Richard could get to it. For 3 weeks, nothing seemed unusual. Then it arrived. An overnight envelope from a bank I'd never heard of addressed to Richard. I shouldn't have opened it, but fear overrode ethics. Inside was a statement for an account holding just over $1.7 million. An account in Richard's name only. An account I knew nothing about. My hands shook as I photographed every page before carefully resealing the envelope and placing it where Richard would find it. That night, I couldn't look at him across the dinner table without wondering what else he was hiding. I needed advice, but was afraid to consult a lawyer. Richard would find out immediately in our small town. Instead, I reached out to a financial advisor whose podcast I'd recently appeared on, explaining my situation off the record. She was blunt. "This is a major red flag. You need to find out if there are other accounts, where the money came from, and where it's going. And you need to secure your own assets immediately." I had been depositing all my earnings into a separate account under my LLC, Second Act Media. So at least that money was safe. But what about the home we'd lived in for 30 years? Our retirement savings? The inheritance from my parents that I'd contributed to our nest egg? All of these thoughts were swirling in my head when the storm hit. It was a Sunday evening, and Richard was at his monthly poker game. I was home alone, filming content for an upcoming sponsorship when the power went out. I lit some candles and was about to call the electric company when there was a pounding at the door. It was Michael, drenched from the rain and looking pale. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he said, pushing past me into the house. "It's about Dad." My stomach dropped. "Is he hurt? What happened?" "No, he's fine. Michael ran a hand through his wet hair. "I went to his office today to drop off the golf clubs he left at my house. His secretary wasn't there, and his door was unlocked, so I went in to leave them. There was a folder open on his desk." Michael pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "I shouldn't have looked, but I saw Mom's name and I think you need to see this." That was when the lightning flashed, illuminating the bank statement in his hand. Not just any statement. Records of systematic withdrawals from our joint accounts into the secret account I'd discovered, spanning years. But worse were the notes in Richard's handwriting on the margins. "Transfer to Cayman complete," and "rental property Bahamas finalized." "Mom, I think Dad's been hiding money," Michael said, his voice breaking. "A lot of money. For a long time." I should have been shocked, but in that moment, all I felt was a strange calm. Part of me had known something was wrong for weeks. Maybe part of me had known for years. "There's something else," Michael continued, pulling out his phone and pulling up an email. "I found this when I was looking for more information. It's to a woman named Lydia." The email was brief but unmistakable in its intimacy. "Property secured. 2 more years and we'll have enough. Eleanor still suspects nothing." My legs gave out and I sank into a chair. Richard wasn't just hiding money. He was planning to leave. With someone named Lydia. After 43 years of marriage. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Michael knelt beside me. "What can I do?" I stared at the statement, the email, the evidence of decades of deception. "I need time to think," I said finally. "Don't tell your brother or sister yet. And don't let your father know what you found." After Michael left, I sat in the dark house, candles flickering as the storm raged outside. A strange sense of clarity washed over me. For months, I'd been leading a double life. Outwardly, the technologically challenged housewife, while secretly building a digital brand. All while Richard had been leading his own double life, preparing to leave me financially devastated. When the power came back on at midnight, I went straight to my hidden laptop and began to research. State laws on financial fraud in marriage, hidden asset recovery, divorce attorneys who specialized in complex financial cases. By morning, I had a plan. I didn't confront Richard. Not yet. Instead, I accelerated my content creation, accepting every lucrative brand deal offered. I needed my own financial cushion, independent of whatever I might recover from Richard. I hired a forensic accountant recommended by my financial advisor friend, paying her from my business account. Within 2 weeks, she had uncovered the full extent of Richard's deception. Multiple properties purchased in the Bahamas and Florida under an LLC that traced back to him, and a woman named Lydia Brennan, systematic siphoning of our retirement funds, and worst of all, a second mortgage taken out on our home using forged documents with my signature. All told, he had diverted nearly $3.2 million over 12 years. Money that should have been ours, mine and his. Money that included my inheritance, my decades of supporting his career while raising our family, my contributions to what I thought was our future. I documented everything, secured copies of all records, consulted with attorneys, and I kept silent, letting Richard believe I was still in the dark. Every night, I lay beside the stranger who was my husband, listening to him breathe, wondering how someone could share a bed for over 4 decades and still harbor such betrayal. During this time, my channel continued to grow, 2 million subscribers and climbing. I'd expanded to Instagram and TikTok with the help of a social media team, and my income was now consistent and substantial. Brands were paying premium rates for my authentic connection with a demographic they struggled to reach. I had sponsorship deals with skincare companies, fashion brands targeting mature women, health supplements, and even a meal delivery service. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Richard was systematically dismantling our financial future, I was building a new one he knew nothing about. The final piece fell into place when my forensic accountant discovered emails between Richard and Lydia discussing their exit strategy, a plan to transfer the remaining assets and relocate permanently to their Bahamas property on our upcoming anniversary. He was planning to leave me with nothing in less than 6 weeks. It was time to act. But I wanted more than just legal justice. I wanted my family to see me for who I truly was, to understand that while they'd been dismissing me, I'd been building something significant. The public humiliation they'd subjected me to deserved a public response. I chose James's annual 4th of July barbecue for the revelation. The entire family would be there, plus many of their friends and colleagues. Richard had always used these gatherings to bolster his image as the successful patriarch, the financial provider, the wise head of the family. In preparation, I did something I'd avoided for 2 years. I told my children about my digital career. Not about Richard's betrayal yet, just about my success as Ellie's second act. I invited them to my friend Nancy's house, where my filming setup was located, and showed them my channel, my metrics, my business contracts. They were stunned into silence. James recovered first. "This is some kind of joke, right? You hired someone to create this fake profile?" "It's not fake," I said calmly. "I can prove it." I pulled out my phone and went live on Instagram, where over 20,000 viewers joined within minutes, flooding the comments with their usual enthusiasm. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, scrolling through the comments on her own phone. "These people love you. They're real." Michael, who had known about Richard's deception but not about my career, started laughing. "Mom, you've been a secret millionaire this whole time? While Dad and James have been talking to you like you're technologically impaired?" "That's about the size of it," I confirmed. "And there's more, but that can wait for the 4th. I want everyone there. It's important." For the next week, I made final preparations. I transferred my most important belongings to a secure location. I gave copies of all financial evidence to my attorney with instructions to file everything the morning after the barbecue. I prepared a video that would go live at exactly 2 p.m. on July 4th, the time when Richard traditionally made his pompous speech to the gathered guests. The day arrived hot and clear. I dressed carefully in a crisp white sundress I'd worn in one of my most popular videos, a collaboration with a high-end fashion line that had garnered over 5 million views. My hair and makeup were impeccable, skills I'd learned from beauty influencers half my age who'd been generous mentors. Richard was in high spirits, oblivious to what was coming. Just 2 weeks remained in his exit strategy. He was attentive, even affectionate, perhaps experiencing some last-minute guilt about his plans to abandon me. Guests arrived, the backyard filled with laughter and conversation, and I moved through the crowd with a calm I didn't entirely feel. At 10 minutes to 2, I positioned myself near the patio where Richard always gave his speech. My children watched me nervously, aware that something significant was about to happen, but not knowing exactly what. Right on schedule, Richard clinked his glass and called for attention. He launched into his usual self-congratulatory remarks about family, success, and his own brilliance. I watched the faces around him. The admiration, the respect, all based on a carefully constructed lie. And none of this would be possible without my wonderful wife of nearly 44 years, he concluded, raising his glass in my direction. "Eleanor, who's been by my side through everything. As the crowd applauded, I stepped forward. Thank you, Richard. I'd like to say a few words myself. Surprise flickered across his face. I never spoke at these gatherings, but he nodded magnanimously. Of course, dear. I took his place at the center of the patio and looked out at our friends, family, and neighbors. For those of you who've known me for years, I've always been Eleanor Simmons, Richard's wife, mother to James, Sarah, and Michael, grandmother to 4 wonderful children, the woman who brings apple pie to potlucks. Murmurs of agreement and affection rippled through the crowd. But there's another Eleanor many of you don't know. I gestured toward Nancy, who handed me my tablet. This Eleanor. I held up the tablet, showing my YouTube channel homepage with its millions of subscribers. A QR code appeared on the screen. If you're curious, scan this code. It will take you to a live broadcast that's starting now. Puzzled, many guests pulled out their phones and scanned. Richard frowned, moving toward me. Eleanor, what is this? I smiled at him calmly. This is me, Richard, the real me. On dozens of phones throughout the backyard, my pre-recorded video began to play. The guests watched, confusion turning to astonishment as I explained my journey from dismissed homemaker to digital entrepreneur. While I've been treated as technologically incompetent by my own family, my recorded voice stated, I've built a 7-figure business with millions of followers. Brands pay premium rates to access my audience. I have a team of 12 people. I was nominated for a Webby Award. The real-time comments scrolling on the video confirmed everything. My followers expressing their admiration, brands I'd worked with chiming in with praise. Richard's face had gone pale. Eleanor, turn this off. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Richard. For the first time in decades, I'm not embarrassed at all. I turned back to the crowd. There's more to this story. Keep watching. The video continued, now showing financial documents with key sections highlighted. While I was building my business in secret, my husband was secretly dismantling our shared financial future. Gasps echoed around the backyard as the evidence appeared on screen. Account statements, property deeds, emails, all revealing Richard's systematic theft and his relationship with Lydia. Richard lunged for the tablet. This is slander. She's making this up. Every document shown is verified and authenticated. I continued calmly. Copies are with my attorney, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, and the state prosecutor's office. The filings will be complete by 9 a.m. tomorrow. The crowd had gone completely silent, all eyes moving between the damning evidence on their phones and Richard's ashen face. For years, I've been humiliated by my husband and my children, I said, addressing the gathering directly now, treated as incompetent, irrelevant, and past my prime. All while I was building something meaningful and Richard was betraying every vow he ever made to me. I looked directly at my husband. The Bahamas property is lovely, Richard, but you won't be enjoying it with Lydia. As of this morning, all your accounts are frozen pending investigation. The properties purchased with our joint assets have been flagged with title companies. And Lydia received some rather interesting documents from my lawyer about her potential criminal liability. Richard's face contorted with rage. You had no right. That money is mine. I earned it. We earned it, I corrected. Together, just as we promised 43 years ago. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. You'll regret this, Eleanor. I'll make sure you get nothing. Several phones raised higher, recording his reaction. My followers were watching in real time, commenting furiously. Dad, let go of her. Michael stepped forward, his face hard. Now. James and Sarah moved to my side, forming a protective barrier. James looked shell-shocked. Is this all true? The money? This Lydia person? Ask him, I said quietly. All eyes turned to Richard, who looked wildly around at the crowd of witnesses, his carefully constructed image crumbling before them. You don't understand, he began, his voice shaking. The pressure of providing for this family. Save it for your defense attorney, Sarah cut in, her voice ice-cold. Mom, do you want us to call the police? Richard backed away, looking suddenly old and small. This isn't over, he hissed before turning and pushing his way through the stunned crowd. We watched him go in silence. Then James cleared his throat. Mom, I don't know what to say. All these years we thought, you thought I was just your technologically challenged mother, I finished for him, while I was building a brand that now has more social media reach than the company you work for. He flinched at the truth of it. Nancy approached with a champagne bottle and glasses. I think this calls for a toast, she said, pouring generously. To Eleanor Simmons, digital maven, and badass. The crowd, still processing the dramatic revelations, began to gather around me. Questions flew about my channel, my business, Richard's schemes. For the first time in decades, I was the center of attention, not as someone's wife or mother, but as myself, a woman of accomplishment and strength. The barbecue transformed into something of a coming-out party for the real Eleanor Simmons. I did an impromptu live session with my followers, introducing them to my family and friends, many of whom were still scanning the QR code and discovering my online presence for the first time. By evening, my subscriber count had jumped by another 100,000. The video documenting Richard's financial fraud and my family's dismissive treatment had gone viral beyond my usual audience, picked up by news outlets and commentary channels. Justice for Eleanor was trending on Twitter. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Richard moved out, facing criminal charges for financial fraud and multiple civil suits. My children, humbled by the revelation of both my success and their father's betrayal, began the process of truly knowing me as a person rather than just their mother. James, the most arrogant of my children, was particularly transformed. I gave a presentation on influencer marketing last month, he confessed over coffee one day. I used your metrics as a case study without naming you. My bosses were impressed by this anonymous senior influencer who had engagement rates that put celebrity accounts to shame. That was my own mother, and I never knew. Michael, who had discovered Richard's deception, became my strongest advocate. I always knew you were smart, Mom, he said, but I had no idea you were a digital marketing genius. Sarah, my only daughter, asked if she could appear in some of my content. I want to talk about mother-daughter relationships, she explained, about assumptions and really seeing each other. Those collaborations became some of my most viewed content, sparking a series on intergenerational communication that resonated deeply with my audience. The legal proceedings against Richard continued, but I refused to let them define me. Instead, I expanded my business, hiring more staff and launching a podcast about late-life reinvention. I partnered with a major publisher for a book about financial independence for women over 60, drawing on both my digital success and the hard lessons from Richard's betrayal. 6 months after that dramatic 4th of July revelation, I received an invitation to give a TEDx talk on digital entrepreneurship after 60. Standing on that red circular carpet, looking out at an audience that included my children and grandchildren, I felt a profound sense of vindication. Many of us, I began, are rendered invisible as we age, dismissed by a society that equates youth with relevance and digital nativity with intelligence. I'm here to tell you that your second act might be your most powerful. The applause when I finished was thunderous. My analytics team later told me that my social media follower count increased by 500,000 within 48 hours of the talk being posted online. Today, 1 year after discovering Richard's betrayal, my life is unrecognizable from what it once was. The divorce is finalized, with the courts awarding me the full value of the assets Richard attempted to hide plus punitive damages. He accepted a plea deal on the criminal charges and is serving time for financial fraud. More importantly, I've founded the Second Act Foundation, helping women over 50 develop digital skills and financial literacy. We've provided grants to hundreds of women starting online businesses, creating a network of support that I wish I'd had when I began my own journey. My relationship with my children has been rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than outdated family dynamics. James recently asked me to consult on his company's digital strategy. Sarah and I co-host a monthly live stream about bridging generational gaps. Michael handles the financial aspects of my business, ensuring that I'll never again be vulnerable to the kind of deception Richard practiced. As for me, Eleanor Simmons, once dismissed as technologically incompetent and past my prime, I've just crossed 3 million subscribers and signed a 7-figure deal for an exclusive content series with a major streaming platform. My book hit the New York Times bestseller list in its first week. And most satisfying of all, I've received thousands of messages from women inspired to reclaim their own power after decades of being underestimated. The lights that went out that stormy night were more than just the power to our home. They were the lights of my old life, a life built on illusions and inequity. When they came back on, they illuminated a path forward that I never could have imagined. If you've connected with my story, if it's resonated with something in your own life, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel. We're approaching 1,000 subscribers, a major milestone that will help us bring more powerful, emotional stories like mine to this platform. Your subscription isn't just a click. It's validation that these stories matter, that women like me matter. It takes just a second to subscribe, but that simple act helps ensure that voices like mine continue to be heard. Because every one of us deserves a second act, and sometimes that second act turns out to be our greatest performance.